Miraculous is a cartoon show that, for the longest time, I thought was simply for young girls, but upon my sister forcing me to watch the whole thing, I discovered that a deep and rather dark storyline permeates over the entirety of the larger narrative. Much like the other deceptively innocent media I've covered on the channel, there is not only thought provoking themes embedded into the very heart of the plot, but also moments of true horrific nature. That being said, let's delve into the darker side of Miraculous Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir. As is the case with most shows that aim for longevity, the past and true nature of the timeline is revealed slowly over the course of multiple seasons, but for the purpose of this video, we will be looking at the lore from a rather linear perspective. As such, laying down the extensive groundwork for the universe that this story takes place in is the most logical first step to this particular narrative dissection. One of the most essential concepts to understand is the mystical beings that populate this world known as Kwamis. These are cosmic entities that embody the different concepts that construct reality. For instance, the main two that we follow in most of the episodes are Tiki, the Kwami of creation, and Plag, the Kwami of destruction. These are obviously opposite concepts, but both are present within physical reality and must exist in tandem with one another, therefore being represented by separate entities. The specific supernatural powers that these beings possess naturally coincide with the concept that they represent. Tiki can manifest things into existence, and Plag can utterly destroy, at times on an apocalyptic scale. He is canonically credited to be the cause for the extinction of the dinosaurs in the show. Their true forms are imposing cosmic creatures with voices of power, although they primarily interact with the human world in much smaller, cuter, and semi childish reflections of themselves. Tiki and Plag, being the figureheads for the two pillars of existence required for the physical realm, can merge together to bring rise to Gimme, the Kwami of reality. This ultra powerful Kwami is known for one main trait: the ability to rewrite reality entirely based upon a wish of the person who summoned them. This is done by uniting the miraculous, fusing Plag and Tiki, and then confronting Gimme with the wish. Which brings us to the namesake of the show. Miraculous is the name given to objects that basically host the essence of a given Kwami, allowing them to be possessed by a human master who can utilize their powers by transforming into either a hero or villain, dependent upon their motivations and intentions. The intended purpose of this function is to maintain protection and order to the human world, but as we'll soon discuss, these powers can also be utilized negatively. Many of the very powerful miraculous are contained within something called the Mother Box, and are guarded by an appointed guardian of the miraculous by a long standing organization dedicated to ensuring their safety and wise distribution to human holders when need be. Now that the setup for the universe the story takes place in is complete, we can get into the beginnings of the timeline, specifically following the threads that display the darker parts of the extensive lore. Obviously, that means there are many parts of the story I'm not going to cover, but if you are a fan of the show and would like to see me cover some different aspects of the story, comment your suggestions and I may do them in a future video. As for now, the catalyst for the brewing darkness that surrounds this series revolves around two sisters. Emily and Amelie were two princesses who grew up with differing personalities. Emily was more adventurous, unruly, and defiant than the royal family thought appropriate, and this resulted in them sending her to Paris for a while. However, this decision backfired on their desires as she fell in love with Gabriel Agreste, who, at the time, was a humble tailor, thus renouncing her noble rank as an aristocrat to be with him, much to her parents' anger and dismay. The two of them would go on to become happily married and hopelessly in love. Emily was beginning to look like the only option for a child to turn out the way the royal family wanted, so they pressured her into marrying a wealthy American named Colt Fathom. Because of this, it seems Emily's marriage was done out of parental pressure and a sense of duty rather than any kind of true love, while Emily got to enjoy authentic romance in Paris. However, it wouldn't be long before both sisters would encounter a difficulty in their lives. Both sets of couples wanted to have children in order to make their family dynamic complete, but try as they might, it quickly became evident that both of the sisters suffered from infertility. Even the best remedies at their disposal, given their ties to royalty and whatnot, couldn't cure this trait within them. As one can imagine, this saddened the couples greatly, hope for offspring of their own growing dimmer as they continued looking for solutions. However, eventually, they would discover a mystical solution to their problem, what would at first appear as a blessing but would quickly reveal itself to be somewhat of a curse as well. From old photos, we can see that Gabriel, Emily, and a woman named Natalie had a passion for exploring at one point, and during an overseas trip, they made some discoveries that would forever alter the course of the timeline. A book full of information pertaining to the history of the miraculous, something that is said to be Emily's last gift to Gabriel, and two miraculouses along with their respective kwamis, those being the miraculous of the butterfly and the miraculous of the peacock. There's a story as to how they came to be where they were eventually discovered, centering around one of the would be guardians named Fu, but that's a tale for another time. What is important to the situation at hand is that the miraculous of the peacock and access to the powers of the Kwami known as Dusu seem to be an answer to their prayers. Dusu has the power to create life itself, utilizing the will of the user and an enchantment of a specific object. It didn't take long for the couple to realize this could be the key to creating a child of their own, and Emily used the magical power to do just that. Thus, Adrian was born, a young boy who would grow up believing he was a natural born child just like everyone else. And in a way, he was. While there was a moment of triumph for Gabriel and Emily, Colt, the husband of Emily, became all too jealous that Gabriel was able to have a child and he wasn't. After Colt confronted them in a fit of emotion, Emily decided to allow Colt to use Dusu's power as well. I imagine this was primarily done out of love for her sister and not Colt, as he is characterized as rather brutish. This gave birth to Emily and Colt's son, Felix, who Adrian would come to know as a cousin. These two boys, created from a mystical source, both go on to become pivotal to the storyline of the series, despite the fact that they lived vastly different lives during their upbringing. For a good while, Adrian got to have a pretty good family lifestyle. His father had become super successful in his fashion career with his brand excelling, Adrian was on track to be a recognizable model for the brand, and he had two parents that loved him. However, this era of happiness was always doomed to come to an end, as the Peacock Miraculous was damaged, and using a miraculous in that state proves fatal to a human being. Emily fell ill, a sickness that would get progressively worse. This spiraled Gabriel into a madness, as he loved her so much he couldn't imagine a life without her. This decline Emily is going through all started because of their desire to have a child, one that they were able to achieve against all odds, but their success would be the very thing that ended up killing Emily. It is similar to when a mother dies during a childbirth, a tragic incident that laces an event that should be joyous, the arrival of a new life into the world, with sadness and loss. While in this case Emily and her child were alive for years before she effectively died, the emotional turmoil is similar. Due to the existence of one person Gabriel loves, the other person that he loved was condemned to leave him. Gabriel wasn't willing to accept the loss of his beloved wife, though. While the rest of the world believed she went missing and was eventually presumed dead as a result, in reality Gabriel had her comatose body preserved in a glass coffin-like device in a large basement area below his mansion. While Adrian is completely oblivious to this, Natalie knows and goes on to become one of Gabriel's most trusted people from this point forward. Natalie is compliant with Gabriel's increasing grief-induced insanity because she genuinely cares for him. She has had a crush on him since the early years, and seems to still carry some kind of torch for him to this day. Gabriel routinely abuses this dynamic to keep Natalie bending to his desires, although he does display a certain level of care for her as well. But his obsession with Emily never fades enough for him to pursue any real romance with Natalie. On the other side of all this is Felix, who is arguably suffering through even worse family drama than Adrian is. Cole also grew sick just as Emily did, given that he used the same broken miraculous to create his son, Felix. Due to this, Cole began to see Felix as a sort of curse along with the magic that created him. As such, he started calling him a monster to his face, subjecting him to all kinds of demeaning abuse. Something important about these sentimonsters created by the Peacock Miraculous is that they can be controlled by those who possess the object that the Amok, the feather charged with magical energy that gave life to the sentimonster. As such, Cole was able to control his son, with Felix having to obey despite inwardly not wanting to. Similarly, whoever possessed at least one of the rings that was used to manifest Adrian, they would have control over him, which Gabriel utilizes at times during the show. This was a cycle of control and abuse that reflects some real-world dysfunctional family scenarios, up until Colt died from his sickness. In the wake of this, Felix was left with his mother and severe emotional baggage from the years spent with his spiteful father. This developed Felix to become resentful, but more importantly, influenced his rise as a cunning and deviously smart individual as he began to create schemes to finally achieve his own desires. And all this is only the beginning of how heavy this show actually gets. If you're watching this video, that probably means you're interested in storylines, and one of the best ways to consume stories is through reading books. For the past 6 years, I've been writing and self-publishing novels to Amazon, which can be read in both digital and paperback form. Overall, I write in the science fiction genre, but each book has a slightly different nuance that will appeal to people invested in other genres as well. Do you enjoy high concept sci fi? Linear Highway and Genesis Prince of Time should hit the spot. More of a spiritual horror fan? Cult of Shadows has a soul shaking story to get lost in. Or perhaps you're into more of a mystery, better yet, a mystery that prompts you to put the pieces together and solve the narrative for yourself. In that case, Frameless Mirror should be perfect. If you enjoy stories and reading, please check out my author's page on Amazon and find the book that appeals to you. Or perhaps even delve into the entire Lloyd's Halt series. A huge thanks to anyone who considers this, links are in the description, and now back to the video. Now, we can clearly see the roots as to why I consider this show to be surprisingly dark compared to what it seems to be on the surface. At the heart of the story is it's a tragic tale of dysfunctional families, abused children, and overarching themes of love and loss, all incorporated into a larger narrative that revolves around mystical beings and cosmic powers. Gabriel's descent into madness was just beginning, though. He became privy to the fact that uniting the Kwami of creation and destruction would grant him one wish from the Kwami of reality, and devoted himself to acquiring the two Miraculous that held Tiki and Plag at all costs. Knowing that the best way to find them was to provoke the superheroes that used their powers to protect Earth from disaster, Ladybug and Cat Noir, Gabriel utilized the Miraculous of the Butterfly to create supervillains in order to stir up chaos and prompt the heroes to come and try to stop them, the plan being to steal their Miraculous once they were defeated. During this time that Gabriel was secretly terrorizing Paris, he would go by three different supervillain titles dependent on his current powers: Hawkmoth, Shadowmoth, and then Monarch. The way in which he would turn ordinary people into supervillains coincides perfectly with the deeper themes of the story. He will take an innocent butterfly, evilize it with his powers, then use it to akumatize a person going through great emotional distress, in turn gaining a limited amount of influence over their actions and granting them power that matches with their emotional turmoil. Although Ladybug possesses a power that essentially resets the damage that was caused while these people were supervillains, and they don't have proper recollection of it afterwards, the terror of what they are doing in the moment is very real, and countless people had to have either died or gotten hurt during the rampages of some of the higher level threats. Gabriel would continue to do this relentlessly, obsessive over defeating Ladybug and Cat Noir and in turn resurrecting his wife. He doesn't care that there are consequences to making a wish that rewrites reality. Given that existence must always be balanced, if he were to bring Emily back to life, someone else would have to essentially die in her place. In his mad pursuits, he even allows Natalie to use the Peacock Miraculous while it was still damaged to help him meet his goals, which only resulted in her getting terminally ill as well. Even Gabriel himself was willing to take a fatal wound that would slowly kill him to continue his obsessive plans. All while this is happening in the Agreste family, Felix is creating schemes of his own, concocting plans as to how to steal the Peacock Miraculous, even greatly empowering Gabriel, who he discovered was the big bad looming over Paris, in order to meet these ends. And Adrian, of course, is caught in the middle of all of this, oblivious to pretty much all of it, but suffering the ramifications nonetheless. He's already lost his mother, he's hardly ever allowed to leave the confines of his home by his father, is routinely oppressed and controlled by his family situation, and even his romantic endeavors are caught up in conspiracies orchestrated by his father. While there is much more to the show than what we've discussed here, I think this best displays the darkness the storyline harbors. If you enjoyed this video and would like to hear me cover other parts of the show or more specific story beats, let me know in the comments. There is plenty of other themes heavily present in the show, such as politics, romance, family dynamics, social engineering, and of course, more in-depth things to discuss involving akumatization, centimonsters, and the overarching narrative. If this video happens to do well, I'd be happy to cover some of those aspects in their own respective videos as well. As for now, the unknown persists, so the investigation continues.